Well, good morning to you. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion. I got to tell you something. We are actually in positive territory. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, but why don't we go back to yesterday where we had the second day in a row of very, very heavy selling. And you take a look at the Dow itself. It was under pressure from the get-go, down 100, down 200. The next thing you know, it just kept accelerating all the way into the close, down nearly 700 points yesterday, finished down 680. You wonder, can we make that up? I mean, that's a big number, right? When we get to that, I'll tell you, we're doing a pretty decent job so far. NASDAQ, sort of the same story. The numbers are a little bit different, but percentages, the percentage of the NASDAQ absolutely is a much bigger number when you take a look deep down. But the story was that early on there was pressure, continued to have pressure, down a couple of hundred points, finished down about 360 points yesterday. So definitely getting hammered. You look at the S&P and the fact that it got absolutely slaughtered yesterday as well, down over 2% and about a 90-point move to the downside. It was everything, anything. It was getting sold, it felt like yesterday. We had volatility that had a heck of a range. We were in a range from 21 up into the 28s. So that gives you a little bit of an idea as you start to approach 30. 32 would mean we're expecting a 2% move every single day. I don't know that we're going to sustain and get up at that level, but it's possible. There's no doubt we're a sniff away or two. Matter of fact, when I looked and we closed out, I think around 2760 on the volatility index, that's a pretty significant number. And we've talked about how we kept pushing and pushing and pushing on this 20 level. And then finally, not only we break through, but we broke up pretty decent to the upside. Volume yesterday, 42 million. Yep, 42 million, recapturing that 40 million plus. Really big day, and it was broad. Just like the selling yesterday, it was very broad. It was very broad in terms of the volumes yesterday, because when you look at Tesla and Apple, yes, they're almost generally going to be your leaders. They're always going to be somewhere around 1 million contracts, which they were, but just above 1 million contracts for those two. After that, nothing else even close. So it just gives you an idea of how broad this really was with 42 million contracts trading yesterday. Energy was strong early, strong throughout, actually held on, one of the very few areas in the marketplace that finished in the green on this heavy selling kind of a day that we had yesterday. It was up 2% early, started to slide with everything else, but did stay into the green. So that was something, or very close to green and flat. But Technology, that's where the pressure was. It started with tech. It was getting hammered immediately, just about everything in technology. Then you look over at consumer discretionary. That was really getting hammered yesterday, down more than 3%. So that was pretty significant pounding to the downside. When I say tech, I also want to include with that, take a look at what was going on with the semiconductors. We've talked about a lot of what was going on. Yesterday, I was talking with the guys in Bazinga, and they were fantastic. A little podcast we were talking about. And I was just mentioning something that we'd seen here on the Option Elite site, which was a consistent drumbeat of buying over the last 4 or 5 trading sessions in the SOXS, which is the short. In other words, it's a triple derivative. Just think of it this way. If it goes up, that means semiconductors are getting hammered to the downside. Yesterday, the SOX was up pretty decent as we were getting hammered to the downside. Biotech actually did kind of hang in there pretty nicely yesterday. I think when you look at the semiconductors and some of the different parts of that, the one that I would really wanted to focus on today was Applied Materials, MAAT. This name was getting hit along with so many other of those names, but absolutely getting destroyed yesterday. It was down about 7%. That's a pretty significant hammering. You know, I mentioned that SOX, and when it first started hitting on the unusual, just call it 4 days ago, trading about 960 last Friday. Then it was trading close to 12 and actually even getting up in towards 12 yesterday. And all of the buying that we are seeing in there, and this makes sense because with a triple leveraged option type thing that we're seeing here, when you go into the options, the pricing mechanisms that go into it, just know this. Because of how they price it, it is something that you want to be short term. If you're long term, it just doesn't quite play out. And it's very difficult to describe. I'm not going to get into it too deep because it's something that it's really for the pros to be messing around with. But I will tell you what we were seeing very, very short term. It was all May with a little bit of June sprinkled in, which makes a lot of sense that they're not going out in time very far. I got number 2 as far as what really stood out for me yesterday. I talked about energy. How about Chevron? Chevron again. Now, Chevron has been that name that I've brought up time and time again when we're looking at big cap in the energy space. We talk about all those beta names a lot, but the big cap, we've talked about XOM recently. We talked about CVX a little bit here as well. That actually finished in the green. It was one of only 2 Dow stocks yesterday, which makes sense, down close to 700 points, but that actually finished in the green. So overnight, really, really wild ride overnight, settled down definitely as we got into the pre-markets today and started to move. But I wanted to highlight right out of the gate Bitcoin, because that is a really, really interesting volume. The volatility there for this mega, you know, it is what we talk about when we talk about crypto. We almost always move immediately towards Bitcoin. And you look at some of the moves, it was down about 11% earlier today, down towards 50,000. It was underneath and traded 46,000 overnight. Monday, let's not forget, it was 59,000. So to give you a little perspective on just the volatility of what's going on in Bitcoin, it certainly does stand out, and it's definitely something that we've been paying attention to very closely. Now, you go to the pre-market, yes, things look pretty good for the NASDAQ. We're getting a little bit of a bounce, and things look pretty solid, right? But you look over at the Dow, it really wasn't doing a whole heck of a lot. It was up about 30 points. We get into the day, immediately we open, we're up 120 on the Dow, then 200, then 350 in the first half hour. The last I looked, we were up over 500 points on the Dow in the first hour of trading. We're a little bit past that now. And NASDAQ just kept building and building and building and building. And the NASDAQ actually was up about 200 points the last I looked. Crude's trading somewhere in the 64s. Yeah, volatility trading somewhere between 24 and 25. So it's tightening up a little bit. And if we continue to hold on to these kind of gains, I would expect to see that volatility start to ease back steadily throughout the trading session. But we'll see how that pans out. Tech leading right out of the gate. Tech continues to lead, but it's getting joined by some of the other sectors, which is why we've accelerated to the upside, that weren't participating early but are now. And that's the industrials, that's financials. It's a lot of different other sectors that are starting to come into play. Semiconductors, pretty nice bounce today as well. Biotech, also a pretty decent bounce. So we're starting to see a little bit of that positive sort of move today. We'll see if that holds on. It's a long trading session. We all know that. Energy, well, it was the leader yesterday, as I mentioned. It was the leader today, but down to the downside. Started off down about 1%. It's come back too, just kind of getting pulled along with the rest of the market as it's going to the upside. So really interesting to see the big cap tech really being the participant that's really pushing. So it's not just a bunch of these names with these high multiples. What was really working early and continues to work, it's Apple, it's Salesforce, it's Microsoft, Cisco, IBM, Google, Tesla, Amazon, all of those kinds of names really having a pretty solid start to the day and continuing to accelerate as we've watched the NASDAQ start to move to the upside, and the Dow for that matter. We're seeing the Dow as well. But the semiconductor rally, it's a wide, broad move in the semiconductors. You've got KLAC 10 Core, you've got Lam Research, you've got Western Digital, you got names like Applied Materials, Broadcom, all of those participating very, very nicely. I will say in the industrial space, the one stock that stood out for me early was Boeing, because Boeing just started off the day kind of a ho-hum start, it's trading about 222, somewhere in that range. And then before you could blink, it's trading up towards 230. Now, we'll see how it plays out the rest of the day, but it made a pretty nice jump early on, along with the industrials, leading the industrials, but up about 3.5%. Now, let's get to a couple of unusuals. We're done for the day. I do not have something with CNBC this afternoon, but I will see you tomorrow on Market Rebellion here with the take at the usual time, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern time, and then I will be joining the guys at the halftime. That's on Friday. So what do we got today for unusual? How about Goldfields, GFI? We haven't seen a whole lot of gold. We haven't seen a whole lot of silver recently. We did see a little SLV trading not too terribly long ago, but overall, we just haven't seen the kind of volumes that we had been seeing there. So GFI, Goldfields. It also is a little bit in copper as well, but gold is what everybody knows. So trading about 1050, got a buyer of 5,000. And by the way, this makes this unusual as well. It's not short term. They're going all the way out to January. So they're buying the January 12 calls for about $1.20. Bought about 5,000 of those calls in Goldfield. So that one stood out for a variety of different reasons, one of which was we hadn't seen a whole lot in the individual names. And when you take a look and you see this going all the way out to January, that is unusual, because you've heard me talking about May, you've heard me talk about June, but we haven't been talking very far out past that. So this is extending out a little bit further. Freeport-McMoRan, sticking with the material space. This name, I've loved this name. I'm back in this name. I talked about getting back into this name. I've been rolling all the way since late October and just continued to roll, like Ron Ianari here at Market Rebellion used to say all the time, just roll, baby. Well, I've been rolling. Now, I wasn't in, but it did pull back a little bit after yesterday, and everything else was trading about 43 this morning, a little bit higher than that. And then we had a buyer of 5,200, sticking with May, but the May 28th expiring, so the very last week in May, the 45 strike calls. And those were going for about $1.10 to $1.40, as I say, 5,200 of those trading. So back into Freeport-McMoRan. I'm a big believer in the copper trade. I think that we still have a lot more to deal with when it comes to inflation and a lot of the everything in the commodity space. So we'll see how this plays out. But at least you know a risk reward when you're in the options world. So we know what the risk is here in Freeport-McMoRan. Folks, have a great day of trading. Look forward to seeing you here tomorrow and tomorrow as well at the halftime report. Take care.